Mom, this house is too big for you alone. We should move in. Tyler's words landed like a slap, cold and rehearsed, while Natalie's perfectly manicured hand tightened around his arm. Their smiles were polite, their eyes calculating. After 7 years of silence, they hadn't come here for me. They had come for this house, the beachfront villa in Naples, its glass walls opening to the Gulf, the symbol of a life they never believed I could build. 7 years without birthdays. 7 years without a single visit for Thanksgiving or Christmas. 7 years where every achievement of mine was ignored. And now here they stood, acting as though nothing had happened, as though we'd spoken just yesterday. I didn't respond right away. My fingers rested on the warm porcelain of my coffee cup, steam curling upward, blurring the view of the waves outside. I didn't need to ask why they were here. People don't cross the country unannounced for reconciliation. They come when they want something. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Because what I'm about to share isn't just a family story. It's about betrayal, reinvention, and the kind of revenge that doesn't scream, it shines. 7 years ago, I thought my story was over. The day Frank left me for his 28-year-old assistant was the day I stopped believing in fairy tales. 28 years of marriage reduced to a stack of divorce papers and half our assets. At 58, I was left with an empty house, a modest pension, and silence loud enough to crush me. Take a cruise. Join a book club. Enjoy your retirement, Frank had said, patting my hand like I was already halfway in the grave. To him, I was finished. A fading woman meant to step aside quietly. I waited until his BMW disappeared around the corner before I let the laugh escape. Not bitter, not forced, a genuine laugh that startled even me. He was right about one thing. I would be fine, but not in the fading, invisible way he imagined. That first month after the divorce was a blur of paperwork, dividing belongings, selling the family home. I found a modest apartment on my teacher's pension. 30 years in the classroom. 30 years saving carefully, like tending the little pots of herbs on my windowsill. Small, unspectacular, resilient. Olivia, my daughter, called every day from Seattle. Mom, come stay with me for a while. You shouldn't be alone. I'm not alone, I told her gently. I'm simply by myself. There's a difference. Tyler, my son, lived just across town with his wife, Natalie. But the emotional distance was far greater. His calls were rare, his words awkward. And Natalie, well, she'd made it clear from the beginning that my middle-class practicality was an embarrassment to her world of social climbing. During one strained conversation, Tyler sighed. Maybe the divorce is for the best, Mom. Dad was always restless. Now you can relax. Retire. Retreat. Those 3 words, relax, retire, retreat, felt like nails closing the lid on a box they wanted to put me in. A box labeled, done. But I wasn't done. Not even close. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. I was walking down Madison Avenue when I stopped in front of a dusty storefront with a faded for lease sign. Through the glass, I could see nothing but shadows, an empty shell. But in my mind's eye, I saw warm light spilling from the windows, the smell of chocolate cake and cinnamon rolls drifting out, small tables where strangers became friends over coffee. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. Recipes are memories you can taste. She'd passed down her handwritten cookbook to me, its pages stained with butter and love. For years, I'd baked for family gatherings, faculty parties, friends. Everyone always said, "You should sell these." I had always laughed it off. But staring into that abandoned shop, something clicked. Why not? What did I really have to lose? I stood there in the cold afternoon light, my reflection in the glass looking older, worn, but alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. The world had written me off. Maybe it was time to prove them all wrong. The real estate agent almost laughed when I called. That property? It's been empty for nearly a year. Wrong side of town, not enough foot traffic. Honestly, Mrs. Donovan, it's a risk. Perfect, I said without hesitation. I'm not looking for random traffic. I want people to come for what I offer. 2 weeks later, my hand shook only once as I signed my name across the lease agreement. A large portion of my divorce settlement was tied up in that single signature. Security, as the agent called it. Folly, as she surely thought. But to me, it wasn't a gamble. It was a beginning. That night, I dialed Tyler. I wanted him to hear it from me. To maybe, just maybe, feel proud. But Natalie answered. A bakery? She made the words sound like a disease. Mary, be realistic. Do you have any idea how many small businesses fail in the first year? Especially food service. I've done my research, I replied evenly. And I'm not opening just another bakery. This will be different. Her sigh rattled through the line. Well, it's your money to lose. Just don't expect Tyler to bail you out when it collapses. We're saving for our own future. When Tyler finally came on the phone, his voice carried the same forced brightness he used when he didn't believe in what he was saying. That's great, Mom. Really. But maybe start smaller? Farmers markets, perhaps? Neither offered help. Neither understood. But Olivia, even from hundreds of miles away, sent a message the next morning. Proud of you, Mom. I'll be there for opening day, even if it means flying across the country. The renovations nearly broke me. I spent long days with contractors, learning the foreign language of building codes and electrical wiring. My pensioners' hands grew calloused from sanding wood, scraping paint, hauling antique furniture I'd scavenged from estate sales. But the harder it was, the more alive I felt. Every detail mattered. The walls glowed a warm butterscotch yellow, not the sterile white of chain cafes. Vintage pendant lights cast an amber softness, like candlelight at dusk. The centerpiece of the room wasn't a glass counter at all, but a restored library card catalog. Each drawer held a different dessert, and above it, hand-painted by a local artist, the sign read, Sweet Memories Bakery and Cafe. It wasn't just a name. It was a promise. A week before opening, Tyler and Natalie finally came to see the place. They arrived in their luxury SUV, stepping out as though for a photo shoot rather than a construction zone. Natalie's eyes swept across the room, her lips curling into a smile too thin to hide her disdain. It's quaint, she said, running one manicured finger along a vintage table. Very rustic chic, though this location is certainly challenging. Tyler tried harder. The counter's cool, Mom. Very unique. That's the point, I explained, willing my excitement not to falter. Every dessert comes with a story. My grandmother's wartime chocolate cake, the lemon bars that got me through my first teaching job. People don't just want food. They want connection, meaning, to feel part of something. Natalie exchanged a glance with Tyler that made my heart sink. Well, she said lightly, I'm sure the retirement community crowd will love it. They stayed 15 minutes. No help. No encouragement. Just a promise to drop by if we can. I watched their SUV glide away, its polished chrome reflecting the dying light. For a moment, doubt crept in. Then I looked back through the bakery window, saw the soft glow of the pendant lights, smelled the faint sweetness of cinnamon and sugar still clinging to the air. They couldn't see it, but I could. And that was enough. Opening day arrived with the kind of fear that makes your stomach twist. I had baked since dawn scones, lemon bars, chocolate cake, all laid carefully in the drawers of the card catalog counter. Two part-time employees stood by. Jade, a purple-haired art student who knew more about coffee than anyone I'd met, and Miguel, a culinary student with hands as steady as a surgeon. The sign outside read simply, Grand Opening, Sweet Memories, Bakery, and Cafe. And then I waited. The first hour passed in silence. The smell of warm bread and sugar filled the air, but no one came. By noon, only a trickle of curious faces peered in. A couple bought coffee. A teenager bought a cupcake. More money was going out than coming in, and each tick of the clock felt heavier. Then she appeared. Mrs. Peterson. White hair in a neat bun, leaning on a walker, her eyes sharp with curiosity. She ordered currant scones. When she took her first bite, her eyes closed, and she whispered, "These taste like my childhood in London during the Blitz." I pulled up a chair. As she ate, she told me stories of ration books, of her mother's determination to serve something sweet, even when the world crumbled outside. And for the first time that day, I felt the air shift. This wasn't just a transaction. It was exactly what I had dreamed of, a place where food carried memory, and memory carried meaning. She came back that afternoon. My very first repeat customer. Word spread slowly, not through advertisements, but through stories. A retired professor suggested a weekly story circle. Mrs. Peterson asked for recipe cards. Jade pinned a note on the wall. What food brings back your best memory? Strangers filled the wall with scraps of paper: grandmother's soup, Sunday pancakes, first date brownies. The first month was a financial disaster. My budget shrank. My nights stretched into dawn, but the faces that kept returning, each with their own memory, each finding a piece of themselves here, told me I was building something that numbers couldn't measure yet. Tyler texted me once, "Good luck with the opening, Mom. Sorry we couldn't make it crazy week at work." A single line. No visit. No flowers. Nothing like Olivia, who had sent a massive bouquet that brightened the counter for a week. I should have been discouraged, but each time I unlocked the bakery doors in the morning, smelling the cinnamon and seeing the memory wall grow heavier with notes, I knew. Failure wasn't the story. This was only the first chapter. The weeks bled into months, and slowly the cafe began to change shape, not just in its decor, but in its soul. What had started as a trickle of strangers became a rhythm of familiar footsteps. Mrs. Peterson always came for her scones, settling near the window. Mr. Davis, a retired history professor, suggested we host a story circle, an evening where people could gather and share memories tied to food. At first, I doubted anyone would come. But on a rainy Thursday, the room filled. People spoke of their mother's stews, their father's barbecue, the cookies that had marked a first kiss. As I listened, I realized I wasn't just serving pastries, I was serving people pieces of their own lives. Jade added a memory wall, where customers pinned scraps of paper describing dishes that shaped them. The wall filled faster than I imagined, blooming with handwriting, smudges, even drawings. Miguel proposed offering recipe cards so customers could carry a piece of sweet memories home. Little by little, we were becoming more than a cafe. We were a community. By the third month, we broke even. By the sixth, the local paper featured us in a piece titled, "A Hidden Gem, Where Food Tells a Story." The reporter wrote, "Sweet Memories doesn't just serve desserts, it serves connection." When I read that line, tears blurred the page. One evening, Tyler and Natalie finally stopped by. They arrived in their sleek SUV, their clothes sharp and deliberate. Natalie looked around as if she were inspecting a showroom. "It's quaint," she said, brushing her manicured nails against the wooden counter. "Very rustic chic." Tyler forced a smile. The counter's interesting, Mom. Unique. That's the point, I said, trying to keep my excitement alive despite their indifference. Every dessert comes with a card, my grandmother's German chocolate cake from wartime, the lemon bars from my first teaching job. It's not just food, it's memory. And Natalie gave Tyler a look that drained the warmth from the room. Well, I'm sure the retirement crowd will appreciate it. They stayed less than 15 minutes. No offer of help, no real encouragement, just a vague promise to drop by again. I locked the door behind them that night and stood in the glow of my pendant lights. Their doubt clung to me like smoke, but I looked at the memory wall, layered with hundreds of voices. Strangers turned friends, and I knew the truth. They couldn't see it. But this little bakery was alive. It was during one of Tyler's rare calls that the words slipped out, sharper than he probably realized. Mom, you're working too hard. At your age, you should be enjoying life, relaxing, retiring. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, steadying my breath. I am enjoying life, Tyler. More than I have in years. There was a pause, a faint exhale. If you say so. The line went dead, leaving me with the familiar emptiness of his doubt. When Thanksgiving came, I set my hopes higher than I should have. I invited Tyler and Natalie weeks in advance, promising a quiet dinner at my apartment. Olivia couldn't make it from Seattle, but she begged me to celebrate anyway. The day before, Tyler called. Mom, I'm really sorry. We can't make it. Natalie's boss invited us to his lake house for the weekend. It's a big opportunity for her. The executive team will be there. Tyler, I whispered, clutching the phone. It's Thanksgiving. We haven't had a family dinner in months. I know, and I feel terrible. But this could mean a promotion for Nat. We'll make it up to you, I promise. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the untouched ingredients I'd bought for the meal. Turkey, cranberries, pumpkin pie filling, enough for a feast that would now feed only me. The silence in the room pressed against me, heavier than the weight of the groceries. But then an idea struck. I packed everything into boxes and drove to the bakery. That night, the cafe lights glowed warm against the chill outside. Miguel showed up with his boyfriend, arms full of wine. Jade arrived with her roommate, and 3 part-time employees trailed in behind, laughing. Together, we cooked in the bakery kitchen, filling the air with aromas of roasting turkey and cinnamon pies. We dragged tables together, mismatched chairs lining both sides, and we ate until our stomachs ached. Between bites, stories flowed, tales of childhood Thanksgivings, awkward family dinners, and memories of loved ones gone. At one point, Jade leaned across the table, her purple hair streaked with teal now. Your son's an idiot, she said bluntly, wiping cranberry sauce from her lip. No offense, Mary, but anyone who'd skip your Thanksgiving for some corporate schmooze doesn't deserve your pumpkin pie. I laughed despite myself. It's complicated. No, Miguel said gently, raising his glass. It's simple. Family is who shows up. And look around, Mary, we're here. As we washed dishes late into the night, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. Family doesn't always share your bloodline. Sometimes, family is who gathers around your table when the rest of the world leaves you behind. The Florida sun had never been part of my plans. At 64, I thought my days of chasing the horizon were behind me. But then James Whitaker walked into Sweet Memories. He was one of our regulars, tall, silver-haired, the kind of man whose tailored suits never wrinkled. He ordered lavender shortbread every Thursday and always read the accompanying story card twice, as if tasting the words as much as the cookie. One evening, after the last customer had left, he lingered by the counter. Mrs. Donovan, he began. Have you ever considered expanding outside of Portland? I laughed softly, wiping down the counter. I've considered surviving payroll. That's enough expansion for me. But he leaned forward, his eyes steady. I have a property in Naples. Beachfront. Been in my family for years, but none of my children want it. There's a commercial space on the ground floor, perfect for a cafe like yours. Florida? I raised an eyebrow. That's a long way from here. True, he admitted, sliding a business card across the wood. James Whitaker. Whitaker Investments. But Naples has the kind of clientele who would treasure what you've built: quality, authenticity, stories. I'd be willing to partner. Property included. I didn't answer right away, but when I searched his name that night, I nearly dropped my glass of wine. Not just wealthy, enormously so. He had built and sold 3 tech companies before retiring into investments. This wasn't idle flattery. This was an opportunity. For weeks, I wrestled with the decision. Could I really manage a second life across the country? Leave my Portland cafes in the hands of others? But my consultant Diane reminded me, Mary, you've built systems. You've trained leaders. This is the next step, learning to let go of the daily grind and lead at a higher level. So I said yes. The renovations took 8 months. The Naples property had sweeping glass walls overlooking the Gulf, polished floors that reflected the sunsets. I made it my own vintage furnishings, warm lighting, a terrace for outdoor seating, and above the cafe hung the same hand-painted sign: Sweet Memories, Bakery, and Cafe. When I moved into the living quarters above the shop, a sunlit space with a terrace opening to the water, I knew this was more than expansion. It was transformation. The grand opening drew local media. Olivia flew in with her fiancé, cheering me on. James stood by like a proud partner. Strangers lined up, drawn by the promise of food that told stories. The Naples flagship was an immediate success. And Tyler? I had sent invitations 6 weeks in advance. A personal letter, even. The day before, I received a text. Congratulations, Mom. Unfortunately, we can't make it to Florida on such short notice. Good luck tomorrow. Short notice. 6 weeks. They hadn't been to the Portland cafes in years. Not once had they asked how I was really doing. And now, when my world was opening wider than I ever dreamed, their absence carved a hollow ache in me. But that night, as I stood on the terrace, watching waves crash against the shore, I let the ache pass through me. Tyler and Natalie's silence no longer defined me. The business, the community, the life I was building, those spoke louder than their indifference ever could. By year 5, Sweet Memories was no longer just a bakery. It was an enterprise. We had 5 locations across Portland, the Naples flagship, a thriving wholesale business, and even a cookbook in its 3rd printing. My staff had grown to 60. Our revenues approached $8 million annually. And still silence. Holiday greetings reduced to perfunctory texts. Birthdays missed. Thanksgiving and Christmas skipped without apology. The distance between us wasn't accidental anymore. It was deliberate. It was a bright April morning in Naples, the kind where the sky looks freshly painted and the Gulf breeze carries the scent of salt and promise. I was on the terrace, sipping coffee, watching the sunlight break over the waves when the crunch of gravel below made me turn. A rental car had pulled into the driveway. At first, I thought it was a delivery. Then I saw him. Tyler, stepping out of the driver's side, looking thinner, older, his hair flecked with gray I didn't remember. And from the passenger seat, slowly, carefully, Natalie emerged, one hand resting protectively on her rounded stomach. My breath caught. She was pregnant. 7 years of silence. 7 years of missed birthdays, empty holidays, texts that barely qualified as acknowledgement. And now here they were, walking up my drive with smiles that looked polished and rehearsed. Mom, Tyler called, his voice too cheerful. Surprise! We were hoping we could talk to you about something important. I set my coffee cup down carefully, deliberately, as if grounding myself against the sudden storm. Whatever had brought them here, I knew one thing with certainty. It wasn't a sudden burst of love. People don't cross the country unannounced after 7 years to reconcile. They come when they want something. Inside, as I led them into the airy living room, Natalie lowered herself onto the linen sofa, her maternity dress so pristine, it looked like it had been chosen for a catalog, not a visit to family. This place is incredible, she said, sweeping her gaze across the Gulf view. We had no idea your business had grown so much. Of course they didn't. They never asked, never read the articles, never visited beyond the original cafe years ago. Thank you, I replied simply, sitting across from them. This is quite a surprise. You should have called ahead, Natalie smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. We wanted to surprise you and see the Florida location everyone's talking about. Everyone, as if they'd been keeping track of my success from a distance, rather than pretending it didn't exist. Tyler leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. We've been thinking a lot about family lately, about new beginnings. With the baby coming, it feels like the right time to reconnect. Oh, new beginnings. The words floated between us, heavy with calculation. I stayed quiet, waiting. Tyler glanced at Natalie, then continued. Our place in Portland. It's not really suited for a family. No yard, too many stairs, and with the market the way it is, well, it's financially challenging. Natalie jumped in smoothly. We've been considering Florida. Better schools, better weather, closer to family. Her hand rubbed her belly for emphasis. Wouldn't it be wonderful for the baby to grow up near his grandmother? There it was, the hook buried beneath all their pretty words. I tilted my head. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? Natalie's smile widened, almost triumphant. This house is perfect. Spacious. More than enough for all of us. You wouldn't have to be alone, and we'd have the room we need. We could help with upkeep. It makes sense. Tyler nodded quickly, eyes darting around the house, as if already imagining where their furniture would go. For a moment, I said nothing. I studied their faces, the practiced brightness, the faint desperation, the cracks in the facade they worked so hard to polish. 7 years of distance, of dismissing my work as a hobby, of failing to show up for even the smallest milestones, and now they wanted to move into the home I had built from the ashes of everything they'd written off. You want to move in with me? I said at last. My tone even. Tyler looked slightly uncomfortable, but Natalie didn't blink. It makes so much sense. You'd get to be part of your grandson's life from day one, and with your business connections here, maybe you could even help us find opportunities. A fresh start for all of us. The audacity of it stole my breath, but only for a moment. Then, clarity settled. Sharp and cold. They hadn't come to reconnect. They'd come to stake a claim. And as I looked at my son, older, thinner, but still unwilling to meet my eyes, I felt the weight of 7 years pressing down like a verdict. This wasn't about family. It was about survival. And in their desperation, they thought I was the answer. The living room was heavy with silence, sunlight spilling across the floor like a spotlight on the three of us. Tyler leaned forward, his hands clasped, his jaw tight. Natalie sat back, her hand on her stomach, eyes wide and unblinking. Mom, Tyler began carefully, we just thought it makes sense. You're here alone, in this big house. We're starting a family. Why not do it together? I studied him, then turned to Natalie. Together? My voice was cool. Where were you these last 7 years? Together means showing up, not only when you've run out of options. Natalie's lips parted, her voice softer than usual, almost pleading. We made mistakes, but we want to fix things now, before the baby comes. Family should stick together. The word family caught in my chest like a thorn. Family? I repeated, the taste of it bitter. Tell me, when was the last time you treated me like family? My 65th birthday that passed without a call? The Thanksgiving dinners you skipped? Or was it the years you called my work a hobby while I built something from nothing? Tyler flinched, lowering his gaze. For once, he didn't argue. Natalie's composure slipped, irritation flashing through her carefully painted smile. You're really going to throw us out? With a baby on the way? I stood, slow and deliberate. I'm not throwing you out. I'm refusing to let you move in. There's a difference. Tyler's voice cracked. Mom, please. We lost the house. We're drowning in debt. I lost my job. Natalie's clients disappeared. We've been living on credit cards. We thought. His words faltered, his throat tight. We thought maybe you could help. For the first time in years, I saw the boy I'd raised, buried beneath the man who had abandoned me to silence. His shoulders sagged, shame heavy on him. I will help, I said firmly, but on my terms. I'll set up an education fund for the baby. I'll make sure you have medical coverage. I'll use my contacts to help you both find work. But this house, my home, is not yours to claim. Natalie's voice sharpened. So you'll dangle money but keep us at arm's length? That's cruel. I met her eyes without blinking. Cruel was 7 years of indifference. Cruel was treating me like an afterthought. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty. It's survival. Tyler rose suddenly, his voice breaking. She's right, Nat. We can't expect to move in. Not after everything. We have to stand on our own feet. The look Natalie gave him could have cut glass. But Tyler's gaze met mine, wet with something raw regret, humility, maybe love rediscovered. I'm sorry, Mom. For all of it. You deserved better. I nodded once, my throat tight but my hand steady as I walked to the door. I opened it wide, the Gulf breeze rushing in. If you want to change, prove it. But this, I glanced around the sunlit room. The life I had built alone. This is mine. They stepped outside slowly, shadows long against the porch. Tyler looked back once, eyes filled with a flicker of hope. Natalie's face was unreadable. I closed the door. The sound echoed through the house, sharp and final. For the first time in years, I felt not abandoned, but whole.